Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadi Tamastu Mahavishahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may He guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om peace, peace, peace. Good evening. We are reading from the first volume of the 3-volume set of the complete works of Swami Ramakrishnananda, one of Ramakrishna's direct disciples. We are in the middle of the lecture called The Pastoral Sri Krishna, and we've been reading about many of the miraculous things that happened just before his birth, during his birth, and in his early childhood. And Swami Ramakrishnananda has been commenting about how we shouldn't shy away from having faith in these stories. And I pointed out that in some sense it doesn't really matter the absolute historical truth of these things. It's the spiritual lessons that are imparted by the stories that's the most important thing. So we are going to continue to read, and if you're following along in the book, it's page 155. All right, let's start.
Bhagavan Patanjali in his Yoga aphorism states, what an infinite power mental concentration on the part of a man or a woman can bring him or her. The scattered wind, like the scattered rays of the sun, has not much strength in it. It is the concentrated rays of the sun, through a lens, possesses burning power, so the concentrated mind of an individual can burn down the barrier of ignorance and enable him to see all. Concentration not only confers in a man mental power, but also superhuman physical strength, as we know from the aphorism, Balshu Hasi Balandini. When the mind is concentrated upon the strength of an elephant, lion, storm, thunder, or any manifestation of the highest physical force, it imperceptibly imbibes the strength therefrom. And when the concentration is perfect, it becomes as strong as an elephant, a lion, a storm, and he alone is qualified for such concentration, who has not lost his individuality or masterly nature by being an abject slave to his senses. That is, who has become a Rishikesha, or lord of the senses. And Sri Krishna was known by that name, showing that he was a master and not a slave to his passions and appetites. Can there be any doubt that he was a yogi of the highest type, and as such all powers, whether mental or physical, were at his command?
And so it's a good point, and he's talking about how the power of the yogic concentration, even in the young Krishna, allowed him to achieve all of these miraculous events. And so he's citing this as evidence that a yogi can do all sorts of miraculous things when they put their mind to it. And certainly we've, perhaps each one of us in very small ways have discovered that when we really concentrate on something, we can have sudden insights, and just indicating the power of the mind in a much smaller extent. Perhaps this is why schools pick powerful animals as their mascots in order to focus their mind on something strong and magnificent, so that their teams will be better at their sports. Possibly that's it, who knows? We could do a study on that and see if depending on which animal is their mascot, depending on see how good the teams are. So the idea here is, of course, that we want to try to control our senses. We don't want to have the senses controlling us. We want to be able to control the senses. And that's really the secret to spiritual life. And of course, we can do it by various means. The meditation path is probably the most direct, but all the other yogas eventually allow you to become the Lord of the senses as well. All right, let's continue.
Apart from the attacks, which he had to encounter constantly from the demons sent by Kamsa, he had to resist sometimes the celestial powers arrayed against him to test his divinity. Once, when he was tending the calves with his companions in the forests of Vrindavan, a demon, in the disguise of a big snake, devoured all of them. But the indestructible Sri Krishna rent his throat and killed him on the spot, and gave life to his senseless companions after he had extricated them from the stomach of the demon. It was not very difficult for him to do so. As being a born yogi, he had full command over the elements, so that he could transform poison into nectar. This power of the yogi is called Yatra vision, or the power of getting fulfilled whatever he desires, which is the result of his victory over all sensual enjoyments. Brahma the Creator was seeing all this from a distance, and he himself wanted to test the power of Sri Krishna once more. So he stroked the calves of the shepherd boys, stole the calves of the shepherd boys, as they were all on the bank of the Jamuna, taking their tiffin, which they had brought from their homes, that had kept hanging upon the branches of the trees. When they could not see their calves, all began to weep. Sri Krishna at once ran to see who had stolen them. As soon as he had left them, Brahma stole also the shepherd boys, shut them up with their calves in a mountain cave where he kept them sleeping. And in the meantime, Sri Krishna searched every nook and corner of the forest, but he could not find any calf. Then he returned to the place where his companions had been, but finding none of them, he concentrated his mind and found out that this was all the stratagem of Brahma. And without showing the least sign of uneasiness, he at once created out of his mind all the shepherd boys, as well as their calves. And when he returned home on that day, with all his mind-born playfellows and calves, none of the shepherds and shepherdesses knew anything about the stealing of their darlings. They began to love their children more than before, and they did not know why.
This has a couple of symbolic significances. One is that this whole world is a divine play, and so you could think of it as the dream of the Divine Mother, if you like, if that's the metaphor that you like. And so we are all elements in the cosmic dream. So we've all been dreamt up. And so Krishna, being an avatar, and an avatar of Vishnu, can dream up a cosmic dream in the form of all of his friends and their calves. Another thing that can be pointed out here is that this is a fairly common element when you study comparative mythology, that the current hero of the particular scripture is is always shown to be superior to any of the other forms of deities that might have come before. And so, just to make sure everybody realizes that Sri Krishna is now going to be the main focus of attention, we're going to show him to be superior to various other deities. And here it's showing that he's indeed superior to Brahma himself. All right, so.
The very sight of their children used to give them the highest bliss, which comes to him alone, who realizes the glory of his own real self. The song flow of love on the part of the shepherd girls towards their children is an undeniable proof of Sri Krishna's being the soul of all souls, the self of all themselves with whom all souls are eternally united. Whereas the connection with our earthly children is only throughout this life, and hence temporary. Thus our love towards our children, although it seems to be natural, is really acquired and based upon the wrong notion of I and mine, instead of the right one of thou and thine. This natural outpouring of love towards Sri Krishna can only be accounted for in his being the soul of our souls, or in other words, in his being God himself.
Now, of course, in the highest sense of I and mine, if you can identify yourself with the Godhead, we're trying to realize that our true nature is one with God. And once you've gotten to that point, everything is I and mine, because you've identified with the totality. But of course, that's a very high state, and the path of bhakti is one where you take the approach of first thinking of everything belonging to the Lord, because how many of us actually have realized our oneness with God? But we can easily pour out our love towards an incarnation of God like Sri Krishna. And that's also the power of all of these stories. If Sri Krishna lived a very dull, ordinary life, it wouldn't be very interesting. It would be very difficult to focus our attention on it. It would be difficult to find the character very endearing. But the stories about Sri Krishna are extremely endearing, and so it's very easy for us to develop a devotional attitude towards Sri Krishna. So it's going to be pointed out that Sri Krishna was extremely beautiful and had many qualities which all allow us to be very devotional towards Sri Krishna. All right, let's take another paragraph. We actually have a reasonable sized one here.
This state of affairs went on for a year. And when Brahma saw this power of Sri Krishna, he marveled and admitted his superiority in being able to create out of his will. For he had hitherto thought himself to be the only creator. So he appeared before and bowed down to Sri Krishna, who in the meantime had shown him some other instances of his divine power. Brahma then asked his forgiveness in not being able to recognize him as the sole Lord of the universe.
And I think, as we've mentioned before, no matter which deity or incarnation we pick, we can develop the attitude of seeing all the aspects in that particular aspect. And so then they, of course, would become superior to all of those other aspects. But you can do that with any of them. So it's not that any of them are really superior to the other. They're all manifestations of Brahman. But you can pick one, and then it'll appear to be the supreme. It's kind of like having a lot of equally high peaks in a mountain range, and the one you're on looks the highest because you're on it, and all the others look smaller. But you can see all the others from your peak. And so similarly, no matter which avatar or incarnation or deity we pick, that one is going to be our special manifestation of God, and all the others will be subsumed under that particular aspect. All right, and a fairly long paragraph.
If we with Brahma admit him to be the God incarnate, then there can be no doubt in us as to his creating shepherd boys and calves out of his mind. But in this skeptical age, such a faith is hard, nay, almost impossible to expect from our so-called educated young men who talk much but do little. So let me quote here the opinions of our ancient philosophers as to whether such a creation on the part of a higher man, say a yogi, is possible or not. None of our ancient sages or philosophers ever doubted Bhagavan Patanjali when he enumerated his own experiences in his own philosophy, named Patanjalata Darsana, and we have no good reason why we should doubt him now, for we are no way better thinkers than they were, as has been admitted by many profound Western philosophers. Patanjali's opinions, being the opinions of all the theistic and atheistic philosophers of ancient days, quoting him is as good as quoting all of them. But the author of the Yoga philosophy says, requires a little practice on the part of the hearer to fully comprehend. If a boor from the inland, who has no idea of the topography of his land, and who has never seen a sea before, comes by rail and is made to stay shut up in one of the houses of Triplicane here, at a little distance from the sea, can you convince him that there is a vast ocean lying there a few steps from his place? His view being bounded by the four walls of the room, he will have full right to deny or doubt your association, and he will actually do so. If you just take him out for a walk, bring him face to face with the ocean, he will then be convinced of his ignorance. Since mere wrangling can bring about such a doubt, even as to the existence of this vast, tangible ocean of ours, is it then strange that mere foolish talking can bring nothing but skepticism in our minds, if we do not put up our theories with a little bit of practice?
Right, so he's again emphasizing the need for us to have faith in the fact that many of these miraculous things certainly are based on some sort of fact, and it's not just being made up. And just because we've never personally experienced such a miraculous event doesn't mean it isn't possible for someone of the caliber of an avatar like Sri Krishna. And of course we've seen incidences in the lives of Sri Ramakrishna and Sri Sarada Devi where they exhibited rather miraculous powers, where they would appear to people as a deity or knew what they had been doing just before they came and things of that nature. So he's just reminding us of that, and that to have faith in the things that we read in the scriptures. And it's easy to be a doubter if you've never had any experience of it. Just like the frog in the well story that Swami Vivekananda told. If all you know is a little well, being outside of it might seem impossible. And so until we've experienced something, we really do have trouble understanding it. All right, let's read another paragraph. Sure, I'll take a turn. Bhagavan Patanjali says that as by blowing with our mouth upon some burning cinders, we can create many sparks out of them. Similarly, a yogi, by blowing upon his own egoism with the breath of his own intense desire, can bring about the existence of other minds out of that egoism, which are fully dependent upon him. When a yogi acquires such a power, if he then wants to enjoy many things simultaneously, he can create as many individuals as he likes out of them, and enjoy several things simultaneously with them, they being fully dependent upon and in no way different from him. The two aphorisms which contain this view are that the new minds are created purely out of egoism, and although those minds may be many and their tendencies may be various, still they are fully subservient to the mind of the yogi. So again, he's just reiterating the same idea here, that concentration of the mind has a tremendous power to create. You get sort of materialistic versions of that in people that advocate manifesting your own divinity, and they'll advocate focusing on something that you want, like a new car or a new soulmate or a fancy house or a job or something. And people can actually have success at doing those things. The trouble is, it's all materialistic success, and except for perhaps exercising the mind in the powers of concentration, it can actually just lead you a bit more astray rather than giving you power to continue your spiritual path. So it has sort of if you can realize that you've developed this power, and that you could apply it to something a lot more important than a new car, then that might be of value. But normally, people end up just wanting more and more stuff. So it doesn't give them what they're ultimately looking for. All right, so let's see what the next paragraph brings us.
So we can have a glimpse of how Sri Krishna created the shepherd boys and their calves out of himself. When Brahma saw all this, he worshipped the singing shepherd boy and woke up all his playfellows and their calves from that long sleep, restored them to him, and taking his permission, went away to his own sphere. His mind-born shepherd boys and calves, in the meantime, were assimilated in him, and the parents of his friends knew nothing about it.
So again, we're all things in the cosmic mind, and here Sri Krishna is exercising his cosmic mind to create things and reassimilate them back into himself. And it's all the characters are like characters in a dream that are just parts of the ultimate reality. All right.
After this, Sri Krishna put to death a demon who was called Dankashirta
Kasura. There you go.
in the Palmyra Grove, a little distant from Sri Vrindavan, because the latter would not allow anyone to eat the sweet fruits of those trees. Once he was tending the calves with his playmates on account of excessive heat. They all felt thirsty and went into Jamuna to slake their thirst. As soon as the shepherd boys drank the water, they all became senseless as the water was poisoned with the poison of a big snake named Kaya, who lived with his family in that part of Jamuna, which on that account was called Kaya's Lake. Sri Krishna at once saved the lives of his friends by his divine power. He tormented the snake so much that he was glad to leave the place with his family. And once the forest was on fire, All his playmates and calves were surrounded therewith, and he saved them by putting down the fire.
That's a frequent subject of artwork. You'll see Sri Krishna dancing on the head of Kaliya, the snake. It's often pictured as a multi-hooded snake, and it symbolizes again the senses. And Sri Krishna has complete control over his senses, and so he's been able to conquer this metaphorical snake that represents the senses, and he does that by dancing on its head and eventually subduing it and killing it by dancing on his head. So we need to keep the Lord dancing along in our mind in order to subdue our senses and keep them under the control of the divine. All right.
When he grew up to be a big boy of 9 or 10 years, he argued with his father about the efficacy of yearly worshiping Indra, the king of gods. He saw that all the shepherds were intent upon celebrating their annual festival. They were making grand preparations for it. But he convinced his father that it was wrong to worship a minor god, leaving the all-pervading, eternal, and one God of the whole universe. For his part, he said, it was better to celebrate the festival in honor of the hill, Govardhana, which supplied their cattle with good grass, sheltered their town from storm, and in several other ways was a real friend to them. Led away by his advice, Nanda ordered the shepherds to take all the preparations intended for Indra's festival upon the hill and there celebrate it, not in honor of the king of gods, but of the hill itself. And that year they had a grand festival on the hill. This so much enraged Indra that he wanted to destroy the whole of Vrindavan with all its inhabitants by an incessant downpour of heavy rains and hailstones, accompanied with a devastating hurricane. And as soon as the rains began to pour down, the shepherds got so much frightened they did not know what to do and were almost hopeless of their lives. Sri Krishna saw all these things and knew them to be the doings of Indra, and he wanted to teach him a lesson. So he, without any effort, as it were, lifted up the hill and placed it on the tip of the small finger of his left hand, requesting all the shepherds and shepherdesses to take their shelter under it. For a week, he remained in that posture, sheltering all his relatives and friends and cattle from the all-destroying hailstorm and rain. And when Indra saw the superhuman power of the seeming shepherd boy, he came to know who he was, stopped the rain, and asked his forgiveness for the blunder which he had committed in not knowing him to be the conqueror of external as well as internal nature, whereas Indra was only the Lord of the outside universe.
So again, we have a story which shows his superiority to the earlier gods that were worshipped in the area. And this is a very familiar pattern that you see in mythology, where the people they evolve their spiritual beliefs from many nature deities into one supreme deity. And so the one supreme deity has to show his superiority over the other deities. And so he does that by foiling Indra's attempts at drowning the village by holding the mountain over the whole place with one little finger and sheltering it from the storm. Now, of course, this has other symbolic meanings as well, that we should take shelter in God. We should take shelter in Krishna in this particular case in order to survive all of the storms of life. And if we do, he will shelter us from whatever the elements can pour down on us. Shall I take a paragraph?
Okay.
All right. Beauty is the only thing which attracts the human mind here. By the word beauty, we must not understand the beauty of form only. Beauty is sensed and perceived by each one of our 6 senses. Eyes perceive the beauty of forms, ears the beauty of sound, such as melodious and musical voice. Tongue senses the beauty of taste, nose the beauty of smell, as the fragrance of flowers, and the skin the beauty of touch, such as the soft breath of a cool and mild breeze, and sweet embrace of loving friends, and the mind perceives the beauty of thought, such as thoughtful dissertation by a profound and skillful writer. Any of these beauties has full power in it to attract a perceiving person. None of us here, perhaps, has seen with our eyes Mr. Gladstone, the grand old man, but still many of us love him, simply because we have perceived his beauty with our mind in his broad and liberal views, as depicted in the columns and pages of our newspapers and magazines. The man who possesses one of these 6 kinds of beauty commands the love and respect of the whole humanity. The most beautiful person, the best musician, the best cook, the best perfumer, the best manufacturer of all kinds of luxuries that give the highest enjoyment to our flesh, the greatest hero who protects our life and property, and those whom we hold most dear from the ravages of marauding hosts, and wins for us new territories, the best of thinker, wit, humorist, all have been commanding the love and respect of the whole humanity ever since the creation. Since we can exact the love and admiration of all people, if we can have one of these beauties at our command, is it not natural for the man who possesses all these beauties simultaneously to be loved, respected, honored, nay, deified by the human race? So again, of course, being a divine incarnation, the beauty of the divinity shows through in Sri Krishna in all these different ways. And the stories are meant to exemplify and illustrate and put those ideas in our minds so that we can cultivate a love and devotional attitude towards Sri Krishna. All right, let's take another paragraph.
Such was the case with Bhagavan Sri Krishna. He was the most beautiful man, the best musician, the greatest thinker and orator. As we know him from his Gita, the mightiest of all, and giver of all comforts. Our Puranas, as well as the great historical epic, the Mahabharata, reveal to us all these characteristics about him. Is it then a wonder that he commanded the love and respect of almost all the people of the time, with the exception of a few vain and wretched individuals who had no eye to see any beauty anywhere, save in themselves? But his victory over his senses, by his victory over his senses, he attracted the minds of the all-renouncing sages, who on that account loved to call him Rikesha. He won the hearts of his parents by his obedience, beautifulness, and sweetness of appearance and manners, which enhanced their natural affection towards him 1,000-fold. He won the hearts of his friends by his unbounded love towards them, as well as by constantly protecting them from all dangers. He won the most intense love of all, the young shepherd girls, by his unparalleled personal beauty. His all-protecting power won for him the regard of all his neighbors, nay, of the whole humanity. It was therefore natural for him to be regarded as God incarnate, even if we do not take into account the signs and miracles that accompanied his birth. Some people, even up to this time, regard him not as a part and parcel of God, or as a means to reach the highest God, but as God himself. Now, this has come to take place. Now, these people are not losers in any way, and how they look down upon all other ideas of God, save that of their own ideal, Sri Krishna, we shall next consider.
All right, so he's just going to make the case for how Sri Krishna can become your chosen ideal and become the focus of your spiritual life. And of course, as he pointed out in another section, you have to have awakened enough of your own divinity to recognize the divinity in someone like Sri Krishna. If you're completely cut off from any idea of your own divinity, you're not going to be able to recognize it in another, even in a Sri Krishna. And we certainly saw that in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna too. Some people didn't even like Sri Ramakrishna. They thought he was just a crazy person. Some of the parents of the disciples didn't want their kids going to see this madman because they didn't understand them. They didn't have the eyes to see the divinity there. All right, so let's continue and see how this is going to unfold.
Many people there are who think that those believing in a God with form are nothing better than mere brainless fools. To confine the infinite God in a finite human form is as impossible as to confine the water of the whole ocean in a tiny 1-ounce bottle. They hold God to be all-pervading and therefore formless, and they pride themselves on being believers in one formless, eternal, and all-pervading God, and look down upon those who believe in God with form. Let us see how far this faith honestly tallies with their practice. Now by God, everyone understands the Creator, Preserver, and Destroyer of the universe, the King of kings, the Emperor of emperors, the all-powerful, all-merciful, all-gracious, and all-knowing Father of the entire cosmos. This is the universal idea of God.
Of course, by knowing the essence of 1 ounce of water, you know the essence of the entire ocean. And so indeed, one can worship an incarnation of God and understand the infinity of God at the same time. It is for our convenience, really, that the infinite, undivided, unchanging Brahman takes the form of various incarnations and deities so that we have something that we can concentrate our mind on. It's very difficult to grab a hold of the infinity, but you could think of these incarnations as being like handles on the infinity so that you can grab a hold of it. And so I'll read a little paragraph here. Now if a man be sitting alone in his room, being left to himself, he can do anything and everything that he likes, there being no one to criticize or find fault with him. So he thinks himself perfectly free. But after a while, his servants announce to him from outside that a certain gentleman wants to have an interview with him. Then, if he has thrown down his cloth on account of excessive heat, he picks it up, puts on a shirt, combs his hair, stands before his looking glass and sees whether everything is all right, and then tells his servant to bring in the gentleman. To see a gentleman, he must have to be a gentleman himself, so that he may please him and be favorably looked upon him by him. In so doing, he has sacrificed his independence and tried his best to suit himself to the taste and liking of his gentleman visitor. Now suppose the visitor to be the wealthiest, most kind-hearted, and most honorable man in the province. Then, although he may naturally be a very conceited and capricious sort of man, still he altogether banishes all his conceits and caprices, becomes a perfect gentleman, tries to look humble and amiable, so that he may gain some favor and good opinion from him. For the time being, his old friend is banished, and a new self, which may be liked and loved by his honorable visitor, takes its place. That is, he raises himself to the level of the honored self of the gentleman, or he becomes a little Mr. So-and-so. For what does a man really like and love? His own self. In the Upanishads we learn, do not think that a man loves his child for the child's sake, but he loves his child because by loving him, his own self is pleased. So, virtually, he loves his own self. Really, if by loving his wife, children, relatives, or friends, he had to undergo and experience any kind of pain, either physical or mental, then no one could love his wife, children, relatives, or friends. So, whenever a man loves his wife or children, he virtually loves his own self in the form of his wife or children. Hence, it is clear that whenever I try to be liked or loved by another, I will have to transform myself into him or her, and then he or she will be able to love me. And of course, we're trying to imbibe the characteristics of the avatar, and so we're trying to cultivate love for the avatar so we can become more and more like them. All right, want to take a paragraph?
Now everyone wants to be loved by his God, for from God alone he gets whatever is good and enjoyable here. So if he wants to be loved by God, he must have to be a little bit of a God himself. Otherwise there is no hope of the being loved by God. That is the reason why our scriptures enjoin worship God by being a God. That is the reason why there is no essential difference between God and his devotees, except in the point of power. God being infinitely powerful, and the devotee possessing only a little power. That is the reason why in the most orthodox temples of southern India, pariah devotees are worshipped by the most orthodox brahmanas, who, if they smell a pariah 2 miles off, must bathe and purify themselves by uttering the holy names of their gods.
All right, so that's enough for this evening, and I'll remind you that we have, of course, our lecture this Sunday. Swami Vedanta will be talking about what is superimposition, one of the main tenets of Shankaracharya's Advaita Vedanta. Then on Thursday, we'll be celebrating Kali Puja. Starts around 10 o'clock and ends around 3 in the morning. Then on that Friday afterwards, instead of having our usual reading, we'll do our crystal bowl sound meditation. And then on Saturday, we have the Kali immersion. You know, the idea here is that the image comes out of clay and it goes back into the infinite. So it arises out of the infinite and becomes an image that we can worship, and then we put it back in the ocean so that it can dissolve back into the infinite. Just reminding us that these forms that are worshipped are temporary forms that we use in order to focus our minds on particular aspects of divinity. So that happens at the Fun Zone Boat Company in Newport Beach at 9:30 on Saturday morning. All right, so that's the recap for the next week. And if you're still awake on Friday at 7:30, you can join us for the sound bath meditation. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace. Nice to have you. What's your name?
Naren.
Pardon?
Naren.
All right, okay, very good.